All right. So I said world history. All right. These are your standards. Okay. Readiness. That just means that these are the standards that the students will be assessed on at the end of the year for STAR. And then these are tests that support the learning that they need to go over here. So they're kind of, they're listed kind of side by side. So you can kind of see how this TEK helps them better understand that TEK. Okay, so, describe major political, religious, philosophical, and cultural influences of Persia, India, China, Israel, Greece, and Rome. Explain the development of Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy as the social and political factors in medieval Europe. So, it really starts off, and these are just all the TEKs in all the different time periods. So, summarize the rise of independent movements in Africa, Middle East. Identify the causes of the revolutions in 1917 and their effects on the outcome of World War I. So you really just, your world history, it kind of lends itself easier to having a roundtable discussion. Analyze how the Silk Road and the African gold salt trade facilitated the spread of ideas and trade. So this is pretty much, kind of where you would go for those particular TEKs. So let's say I picked, compare the major political, economic, social, and cultural developments of the Maya, Inca, and Aztec civilizations and explain how prior civilizations influenced their development. All right. So let's say I picked that. Okay. So if this would be the TEK that I focused on, going back, it says plan a roundtable discussion lessons for students that centers on an international event that had a ripple effect throughout our national and local news. So for this particular lesson, I'm thinking maybe I look up, you know what? I forgot to type in a lesson description. Please don't let me hurry up and do this because I don't want to make you guys think that this isn't description or isn't necessary. So I'm just going to kind of summarize this lesson. Students will work in groups to discuss the purpose of different informational texts. Students will only use the book covers to make predictions about the author's purpose. At the end of the lesson, 3 days, students will create their own book cover for an informational text. We should be able to determine what the book is about, i.e., what is the author's purpose. Okay. All right, so for this one, plan round table discussion on, so let's say I wanted to tie in a current event. So I would probably go and look up maybe some current archaeological findings. Are we still finding things that date back to the Aztec civilization? Are we still finding things that date back to the Incan and Mayan civilization? Different things like that. So honestly, coming to Google, I'm going to type in Aztec civilization. And instead of just doing the search, I'm going to go to news. Okay. All right, so Sania people have cultivated land near Albuquerque since 1300 AD and traced their lineage to the Aztec civilization. How smallpox devastated the Aztecs and helped Spain conquer an American civilization 500 years ago. Hello, that you can definitely have a conversation about that. This one, Christian Science Monitor, just because that source. I don't know if I want to really count that as news. This one, it just says Aztec Press, but it's about a movie. Ancient Mesoamerican ball game returns to Mexico City. This is definitely something that you can kind of talk about. Religion of the Aztecs. I don't know about this source though. But this is just an idea of how you can kind of start to think about this roundtable discussion. Now, given that they're adolescents, you don't necessarily have to have as much moving around, putting stuff together, cutting, gluing, because at this stage, that's not necessarily what they're into. What they really want to do is they want to be able to have discussions, and they want to be able to kind of build their own knowledge and their learning on their own. So your role as the educator is you really just want to kind of clear up some of those misconceptions that now in their big age, they're more likely to hold on to those misconceptions as fact. Whereas younger children, usually when you tell them something is a misconception, they're kind of like, oh, okay. And they're able to move on. When you get to the adolescent stage and that learning has really kind of taken hold and taken shape, your job as an educator is you really want to ask impactful questions that make them think about some of the misconceptions that they may already have. So you want to be careful where you're not telling them what to think or how to think. You're just kind of presenting them with objective information, or as objective as you possibly can get it. And they come up on their own and they make the connections on their own. So with this particular lesson plan for adolescents, you should be using a lot of different resources. So if I want to come back to our TEKS, and I'm going up here to our process standards, you're doing things where maybe they have to interpret a map, maybe they have to interpret some charts, maybe they have to go through and look through different types of, different types of sources. So analyzing primary sources, analyzing secondary sources, different things like that. At this stage, you definitely want them writing. So, that's something that I'd be looking for in this particular lesson plan for adolescents. A lot more writing, a lot more discussing. They're able to do things. They're able to kind of work in groups wholly and completely independently. So those are the things that I would be looking for as you go through and do your adolescent lesson. And again, be mindful of your duration. So if you kind of plan out a lesson, but then you want to go back and you realize, you know what, I don't want to try to cram this all into one class period. Let me, spread it out over 2 class periods or 3 class periods. That's totally fine. A TEK like this, because it talks about Mayans, Incans, and Aztecs, maybe for a lesson, you may only focus on one. So you may only focus on the Aztec civilization. And the next day you do the Inca. And then the next day you do the Mayan. And then maybe on the last day is the day where you kind of do a compare contrast of all 3 together. If you do something like that, just include that in the general lesson description. Something like, this portion of the TEK I will focus on for this particular day. And then let me go back and make sure that I put the TEK number. All right. You still want to make sure that you're using your questions. You're still using the same template, and you are definitely still incorporating SEL, especially at the adolescent stage, because they are more aware of what SEL actually means. So as we're talking about history, as we're talking about culture, this is where you want to be mindful of the different cultures that are in your class. Is this a triggering moment in history for them? So like for your students, your African-American students, if you're presenting a lesson on slavery, are you going to take the time to acknowledge that this may be a triggering lesson? It may bring up some feelings about slavery that, they may not want to talk about. Those are things that you want to take into consideration as you plan these lessons. Because like I said, history at this age, when you really know about the real history and what actually happened, and you're kind of dealing with taking what you're learning in class and then maybe kind of smashing it with what you learned on your own or what you learned at home,